Hey everyone, welcome to the second installment of my historic deck series. If there is a historic deck at any point in Yugioh's history and you want to see it on this channel, definitely let me know. So starting this with J. Kim. J. Kim was the pilot of this zombie deck that was played in the 2005 Shonen Jump Charlotte. This was taking place in June of 2005, and it's definitely one of the more unique decks of historic GOAT format. Now, J. Kim was known as an innovative duelist, and as you can clearly see with the deck, it's a zombie deck. You don't really see zombie decks, at least back in the day. It was very straightforward with a lot of the decks. It's either a GOAT control deck or some sort of GOAT control chaos variant, or more of just like a general beatdown thing. You didn't really see zombies, let alone in the top level competitive play, but here you had one that actually got second place. Yeah, we're not tackling the first place deck, we're talking about the second place, though it did put up a very good fight throughout the Charlotte tournament. Now with the card, you can tell it's a bit of a historic GOAT. Mainly with the Air Knight Parshath was definitely played because Scapegoat was such a popular card in many and most decks. With Air Knight Parshath, it also lets you draw a card, which is good. It is slightly weaker than Vampire Lord, so there wasn't a ton of very strong monsters in this, but you definitely had ways to get around that, whether it was Nobleman of Crossout, Mirror Force, Tribe Infecting Virus. Now, J. Kim was very confident with this deck. He played this with a sense of pride. Like, he definitely knew the deck he had going in. He definitely knew the ratios he was working with, and he definitely played it very aggressively. Sure, he did have some defensive cards like Spirit Reaper, but he did use cards like Giant Rat to attack into a stronger monster, into Pyramid Turtle, and to Vampire Lord. He definitely wanted to get that push in to get his cards as quickly as he could. And using cards like Book of Life and Premature Burial and Call of the Haunted, you can get back a lot of very troublesome cards. I mean, Vampire Lord is already an annoying card to take care of because when he's destroyed by a card effect, well, he'll come back. And between him and Spirit Reaper, you can really snipe cards. You include cards like Creature Swap to attack into things like Pyramid Turtle, Giant Rat, and sort of steal potentially some of your opponent's stronger monsters. This is definitely a scary deck. With modern vampire decks, you definitely see different ratios of cards. Even with just normal modern day GOAT, you don't see Lightning Vortex nearly as much. Perhaps maybe not 3 Dust Tornadoes or a single Creature Swap, or especially Air Knight Parshath. And they're definitely arguably better modern decks, but in terms of historic, this definitely put up a great fight. There was a lot of great cards in this. A lot of ways to showcase just zombies are really good, and J. Kim clearly knew that way before many other people were considering it. And I still think that the zombie deck in GOAT format is a very underrated deck. There's many other zombie variations out there, and this is just being pure Vampire Lord zombies. We're not playing a Ryukoki or anything along that lines, or Call the Mummy. I mean, I don't think anyone plays that anyway. When it comes to a side deck, it's definitely a lot more beatdown kind of. You have the Berserk Gorillas, Injection Fairy Lily. Mobius is great for more back row stuff, but it's still a strong monster at 2400 attack. And you can definitely tell in the matches that J. Kim had, at least in the 3 that we are aware of in terms of the play-by-play, that he did side into these cards fairly often, especially Berserk Gorillas, to just get that constant pressure, because if your opponent's going to try and get more effect removal, might as well just kind of help play around that. You have cards like Mystic Swordsman level 2 for back row or face down cards, and Trap, Dust Shoot, and Mind Crush are great for just knowing what your opponent has in game 2 and 3, because you're already kind of going to know what they're playing after game 1. So this was a great way to side deck against many of those cards, and he definitely used this as much side deck as you could to his advantage. Now the problem with this deck is that when your opponent has many cards that take care of your cards that aren't by battling, it makes a lot of trouble, because all of a sudden they're going to take care of your Spirit Reaper, they're going to have ways to take care of Vampire Lord if they can attack over it. And that was kind of the problem with J. Kim's deck, with this deck, was that when your opponent had an out to it, it really hurt. There is a lot of great things to say about this deck. It isn't like some other top placing decks of older formats that weren't first place. This one definitely could had won first place if it just made a couple tweaks, if it just, you know, luck of the draw is a lot to do with it sometime. And I think it's one of the more notable decks, at least for me, for historic GOAT format, because a lot of the decks, aside from the first place stuff, is kind of falls along the wayside. There's a lot of decks you look at and like, oh, it has this interesting card here, has an interesting card there, maybe its side deck is interesting, but rarely do you see a deck that does so well that's such a against the grain kind of deck. It isn't the stuff you'd see. It's more hipstery in that regard, but it's still very powerful even back then, and they clearly had things like all these Dust Tornadoes and Air Knights who play against the meta. So let me know what you think about this deck. Is it kind of interesting? And again, let me know what other historical decks you'd like to see in the future profiled on this channel. And until I see you all next time, have a wonderful day.